everyone, my name is Kelly and I am the tropical science teacher. And in today's video, I'm so excited to share with you my 5 simple tips that you could be using to help make your life easier when it comes to grading. Every teacher knows the struggle of trying to find that work-life balance. Grading can make that balance so much more challenging because it takes up just so much of your time. I've made my life so much easier when it comes to grading by switching to a standards-based grading system. It has really changed my life in terms of how much time I do need to spend grading, and when I do have to grade, it makes things just so much easier. So I want to share today my tips that have worked with my standards-based grading system to help make my life as a teacher so much easier. Before we jump in, if you are looking to switch to a standards-based grading system but really don't know where to start, I do have something for you that might be helpful. So if you click on the link in the description, that is a link to a free guidebook where I show you step by step what you would need to do to get started implementing a standards-based grading system in your high school classroom. All right, before I give you my 5 tips, I do just want to give a little backstory about why I decided to create my own teacher grading system. So for me, grading used to be such a chore. I never really enjoyed it because the parts of teaching that I loved were really in the classroom, in front of students, teaching students the content. That's the part I love about teaching. For me, grading was just this homework that I had as part of my job that I had to do. The struggle really came for me because I was using a traditional 100-point grading scale. And when it came to making assignments, deciding, is this a 10-point assignment, a 20-point, 30-point, 50-point, and so on, I knew that the more important assignments got more points and lesser important assignments would have lower point values. And then, it became, okay, it's a 20-point assignment. How do I divvy up those points? This is the system I grew up using as a student or seeing as a student. So it was the system I used as a teacher. And being that it was all I knew this is what I should be doing when it came to grading, is assigning points. But I really just felt like I didn't know what I was doing. It was such a struggle to come up with those point values and deciding which problems got which amount of points. And then when it came to actually grading, did they lose the whole point? Did they lose half a point? It was just so mind-numbing to me, this process of grading. And I really just hit a wall when it came to grading any open-ended, open response style questions. So if it was a 10-point question and, a student kind of was there, they were kind of saying the right things, but it wasn't explicitly what I was looking for. Did they earn the full points? Did they get half the points? Do I deduct just 1 or 2 points? Again, I just felt like I was arbitrarily taking off points. There was no real system for how I was deducting points. So one day I decided to go up to a more veteran teacher that I had confided in, I'm struggling when it comes to grading. I'm not enjoying it. It feels like such a struggle, and I don't know how I'm assigning and deducting points fairly. I just don't know what to do. And so this teacher had talked about using standards-based grading to just be really looking at what should the student be able to do based on the standards that are put forth for the course, and have they met those standards or not. And instantly, I was just really hooked by this standards-based grading system because it would take away a lot of that guesswork when it came to grading, the part that I was really, really struggling with. So if you're not familiar, a standards-based grading system is really just a big shift in education where we're moving away from assigning points per assignments and really focusing on grading for mastery. So as a teacher, you are tracking student learning, and in order to help your students grow and improve in their learning, you're providing them mastery-oriented feedback about how well they are meeting or not meeting those standards. This is completely different from the traditional grading system you're probably familiar with or using, because in a traditional system, we grade per assignment. So instead of grading per standard and looking at how well a student mastered a standard, we put a point value on an assignment, whether it's a homework assignment, a quiz, a test, a project, and then we say, okay, how many points did you earn out of the total amount of points? Boom, that's your grade. All right, so Tip number 1 of my 5 tips to make your grading life much easier is don't grade everything. So as a first year teacher, my idea was, if a student passes it in to me, I have to grade it. And that is no longer the case for me anymore. Grades are tied to standards because I use the standards-based grading system. So if an assignment is merely just to have them practicing and it not necessarily something that I'm, looking to see their final assessment on a particular standard, it's more just practice work, I don't grade it. This will save you so much time by not grading everything. And when I say grading, I mean like grading for accuracy. Have they mastered a standard? Do they really understand what they're supposed to understand? People then are, some teachers might say, well, how do you ensure that students are going to do in-class work or do something at home for homework? And my answer to that is I just will then grade for completion. And so when I say grading for completion, what I mean is, did the student do it, not do it, or maybe half do it? So in my grade book, what I do when I grade for completion is I use phrases, I use words. I don't know if everyone's learning management system will allow this, but I can put the word done or not done or half done or incomplete, some variation of those words in my grade book. So I'm recording whether a student did the work or not, but I'm not putting a numerical grade that would then impact their term grade. It's just, did you do it or did you not? Because by doing it, you should be learning. And if you chose not to do it, then that is obviously potentially going to impact how well you do on future assessments. In addition to not grading everything, I do also make it a point to have students grade work. So this is kind of like a little sub tip within tip number 1, where you are not grading everything. I make it a point, if we're doing stuff within the class and I have time to go over it, that we're going to swap papers and we're going to grade it ourselves. To make sure students are following along and grading their work, I do make it more of an activity than just saying, I'm going to go over the answers. I say, you need to take out a pen or a pencil, something of a different color, or we need to swap with your neighbor. So that way it becomes a little bit more interactive when I tell them to do this versus just pay attention and see, did you get the answers right or not? And I always say that you need to be writing feedback. So if you didn't get it right, it's not just an X, you have to write the correct answer. And then if it's your own paper, come up with a little explanation why, like give a little bit more detail about why that answer is correct or why the answer you wrote was incorrect. So tip number 2, I've alluded to earlier, and it is to use a 4-point grading scale. So you probably are used to that 100-point grading scale, but again, this creates just such drastic room for error when assigning grades and deciding on point values. Again, think to yourself, is an 87 really that different from an 83 in terms of what a student understands? Or is there just probably a couple fine-tuned things that they might have, done differently to get an 87 versus an 83? And so because of that, a 4-point system will take away all of that potential room for error. So the 87 and 83, they're going to get that same score. So in my classroom, my 4-point scale goes from a level 4 score to a level 3 to a level 2 to a level 1. So the best way to explain this, think of a level 4 as that A+ quality work. The student has mastered the standards on a particular assessment or project. They know what they're supposed to know, but they can show it maybe in more complex ways than just like recalling information to you. A level 3 would be more of like that B. So an 87 and an 83 would fall into this category. And these are students that are meeting their standard. They can provide the correct information to you most of the time, maybe getting a few things wrong here or there, or they can demonstrate they understand something, but it's nothing new, it's nothing complex than what you've already shown them. I'm going to jump over level 2 and go to level 1. So a level 1 score is earned in my classroom when a student has either shown 0 evidence, so they haven't completed something, they haven't done the work, or they have done the work, but it's pretty much mostly incorrect. So that would be a level 1. So think of that like F quality work. And then, so back to the level 2 is now somewhere in between a level 3 and level 1. So they're more than a level 1 in the sense they know some stuff. They're not completely wrong in their answers, but they're not at the level 3. They're not meeting the standard because they're still not there yet. So that's how I like to phrase it. They're approaching the standard because they're not there yet. And so by using this 4-point scale, it's really easy. I can look at work and easily say level 4 versus level 3. Like this person, they've got everything and they're really creative in the way that they've demonstrated it. Whereas a level 3, they get it, but they're not doing anything extra. So it's really simplified scoring for me because I can really easily tell the difference between a 4, 3, 2 and a 1. So the next tip I have for you, tip number 3, is that you need to use rubrics to help provide mastery-oriented feedback. So I was reading this blog on Edutopia and I came across this single-point rubric. And I fell in love with the idea because I was starting this standards-based grading, and a lot of standards-based grading involves feedback. So now that we're reducing our grading scale, we really want to make sure we're telling students why they're in the level they're in and how they could get to the next level up if they're not already at that highest level. Because remember, we're lumping together scores that would be different from an 87 and an 83. Well, there's got to be a reason those grades in a 100-point scale were different. So we do want to report that information back to students, and we use that in form of feedback in a rubric. And so I love the single point rubric because back when I was starting this, I was thinking about rubrics and the rubrics I had seen as a student growing up. And it was all these rows and columns with tiny, tiny text squished in. And it was outlining the difference between exemplary work, just meeting expectation work, satisfactory work. And it was overwhelming, to say the least. One, as a teacher, to make all that, and then as a student, just to have all that text there, probably not going to read through it all. So with a single point rubric, you have a column for the standards, you have a column for what level they're at, the 4, 3, 2, or 1, and then the last column in your rubric would be blank until you fill it in with feedback. So comments about why the student is at the level they're at. And I'm going to tell you, it sounds daunting at first to be grading with this sort of rubric, but it has changed the game of grading. I feel like I'm a better teacher using this single point rubric because, if I have a standard, a student's at a level 3, I tell them why they are at a level 3 and not a level 4. They read that feedback. They actually read it. I promise you they read it. And then they want to fix it, right? Instead of just being at an 83 and seeing, some red checks and red X's on a paper, they're getting a text blurb from me telling them why they weren't at the highest level, and they feel more inclined to want to fix that. And so this is like a little side tangent, but I allow my students to retake things and redo their work to reach those higher levels. So they're more likely to try to improve and grow in their learning with this feedback. So for tip number 4, you're probably already overwhelmed with what I've told you. So this one is crucial to really help you save time when it comes to grading and grading with rubrics. And that tip is to make a comment bank. Save comments that you can use time and time again. It's going to take some time to start saving up comments where you have enough that it can really make grading quick. But while you're starting out, have a Google Doc open or a Word doc or even notes open. And as you are starting to grade the first couple people in your pile, save those comments that you write out, because more likely than not, you're gonna see the same mistakes pop up time and time again, and you can reuse that feedback that you're giving. And you might just tweak it here and there for individual students if you see some specific things, but some common comments that I make have to do with spelling and grammar. These are things I'm not deducting points for, but, I'm not going to give a student a level 4 if I'm getting this work back where they've shown me they understand it, but, it's full of these spelling and grammar mistakes. I want to make sure to put that in a comment so they know that they need to work on that and fix that, So that's a comment I come back to time and time again. So by saving these comments, I can quickly just copy and paste and maybe tweak a little bit. And, then I also start to notice patterns across my feedback, because I see some of those same mistakes popping up over and over again because I'm using the same comments over and over again. So then it really helps direct where to go next in my teaching. So having that comment bank can really, really save you time. If you grade through Google Classroom, they do actually have a comment bank feature where it will save comments for you, and then you can just click right on a comment that you want to add in. Last but not least, tip number 5 is that you should be developing a teacher grading system. So for me, I needed to come up with a grading system just to help keep myself organized and just to save my sanity. And so what I did to help develop a system is I picked one day of the week where I would focus on grading. So for me, that's Fridays. I like to have that rest of the work graded by the end of the week. So I'm trying not to have work to do over the weekend. And to think, oh, you're going to get all your grading done in one day. Remember, I'm not grading everything. Grading for me is a lot quicker with my 4-point scale. So trying to save all the week's work, it might only end up being 1 or 2 assignments per class that I have to grade. So there's really not that much I'm, piling up to grade in one day. So it really works for me to have that one day where I plan that I'm going to sit down and grade everything. And then pretty much once everything's graded, it's ready to go to be handed back the next class. So when my students come in on Mondays, they know that they're probably going to be getting work back that I had graded either Friday or maybe slacked off and did a little over the weekend. So having this system, it keeps me more accountable. Part of my problem with grading is, I'd get a pile of papers and feel like I'd have to grade it right away. And then it just seemed like the pile was endless and it just kept coming and going. But by having a set day and time where I want to sit down and grade, I'm more likely to hold myself accountable because I have it on my schedule to sit down and grade than if I'm just to see a pile and haphazardly like, I'm going to grade now, or I don't feel like doing this right now. Have that system in place. It will keep yourself accountable, and it will make it more of a habit to do it once a week versus, every couple days, tackling the pile. All right, so I hope these 5 tips are definitely going to help make your teacher life easy when it comes to grading. And let me know how these tips work for you in your classroom, or if you have any additional suggestions for me. If you, again, are really thinking about switching to standards-based grading, make sure you click that link below, as you'll get my free guidebook for how to set up your own standards-based grading system. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to talking with you soon.